The sun pressed down on Cedar Ridge with the searing weight of a branding iron, baking the dusty Main Street until it wavered like a desert mirage. Wade Thatcher narrowed his eyes against the blinding glare as he swung down from his stallion in front of the general store, the jingle of his spurs slicing through the stillness of noon. The town seemed to hold itself in a hush, broken only by the restless whinny of a horse at the livery and the weary creak of timber swelling under the relentless heat. At 43, Wade was a man carved by the land itself. Deep furrows framed his steely gray eyes, and years beneath the sun had tanned his skin into weathered leather. Broad shoulders pushed against the seams of his shirt, while calloused hands told the tale of rope, earth, and sweat. Yet behind his imposing frame lingered a quiet vacancy, eyes shadowed by loss, shaped by nights of empty rooms and beds gone cold. The bell above the store door jingled as Wade stepped inside. Samuel Morrison glanced up from behind the counter with a wry smile. "Afternoon, Wade. Hot enough out there to fry an egg on stone?" "That it is," Wade replied, his voice hoarse from dust and long silences. He moved through the aisles with brisk efficiency, gathering what he needed without indulging in idle talk. Samuel stacked cans on the counter, eyeing him. "Doc Peterson mentioned it. You've finally gone and done it. Another wife, eh? About time. A man like you needs sons to carry on the name." Wade's jaw hardened. Ever since Martha's death from consumption 2 winters back, the town had buzzed about his future. After church on Sundays, widows and mothers would trot their daughters before him, all hopeful smiles and scrubbed cheeks, leaving him feeling like a bull on display at market. "I placed an ad back east," Wade said evenly, pulling a coil of twine from the shelf. "She'll be on tomorrow's train." Samuel let out a low whistle. "Mail-order bride, huh? That's a dangerous gamble, Wade." Samuel's words echoed. "Never know what kind of woman you'll be getting." Wade didn't answer. He'd already poured 3 long months into that advertisement, weighing each word as carefully as he would select breeding stock. "Established rancher seeks young woman of good health and moral character. Must be willing to work hard and bear children. Comfortable home and security provided." It was simple, plain-spoken, no illusions, no room for misinterpretation. The replies had come slowly, a trickle of letters from orphans, widows, women clawing for a way out of bleak circumstances. But one letter had caught his attention above all the rest. Ruby Mae Dawson. Her handwriting was elegant, her words steady yet modest. She claimed to be 20, eager to labor honestly, ready to bear children, and willing to forge a new life on the unforgiving frontier. She'd sent no photograph, insisting modesty spared her from such vanity. Still, her words painted her as youthful, virtuous, and, above all, exactly what Wade believed he needed. The following morning, Wade rose before the first rooster crowed. For the first time in years, he trimmed his beard, dusted off his best hat, and polished the leather of his boots until they caught the light. His ranch hands glanced his way with puzzled looks but wisely kept their silence. By the time the train whistle cut across the valley, Wade's heart was pounding harder than he dared admit. The station was alive with movement, families reunited in tear-stained embraces, businessmen rushing past with leather cases in hand, children darting between skirts and boots. Wade held himself straight at the edge of the crowd, eyes scanning for the image he had carried in his mind. A fresh-faced girl in her Sunday dress, wide-eyed with innocence, pliable and new to the world. Then he saw her. She descended from the passenger car with a composure that drew every glance her way. The burgundy fabric of her traveling dress clung to curves that spoke not of girlish youth, but of a woman in full bloom. Dark hair, swept into a neat updo, shimmered with auburn strands that caught the afternoon sun. One gloved hand lifted to shade her eyes as she surveyed Cedar Ridge. Wade's stomach sank. This was no 20-year-old girl. This was a woman seasoned by time, confident in every step, older and unmistakably more worldly than she had claimed. His first instinct was to turn, to let the train carry her right back east without so much as a word. But then her gaze locked on his across the platform. There was no timidity in those amber eyes, no modesty, only challenge. With her chin lifted, she crossed the boards in deliberate steps, ignoring the hushed whispers that swirled among the townswomen. When she stopped before him, Wade caught the faintest trace of jasmine perfume, exotic, unfitting, and utterly unforgettable. "Mr. Thatcher, I presume?" Her voice rolled with a soft southern drawl, sweet on the surface but tempered with steel beneath. "You're not 20, Wade said flatly. Her red lips curved, though the smile never touched her eyes. "And you're not the romantic poet your letter suggested. Seems we both took liberties with the truth." The crowd pressed closer, hungry for spectacle. Wade could feel their stares boring into his back, the judgment, the whispers. This was not the demure young bride the town expected. This was danger wrapped in silk and secrets. "The next train east leaves in 3 days," he muttered. "I'll pay for your ticket and lodging until then." "How generous," she replied smoothly, shifting her carpet bag. The gesture drew every eye to the full curve of her figure. "But I didn't travel 2,000 miles to turn back at the first frown. I need a roof, Mr. Thatcher, and you need someone to warm your bed. Shall we settle terms privately? Or would you rather the good people of Cedar Ridge hear our business?" Heat rose in Wade's neck, part anger, part something he refused to name. Without a word, he seized her trunk. "Wagons this way." The ride to the ranch was cloaked in silence, thick with unspoken challenge. Ruby Mae Dawson sat ramrod straight, gloved hands folded primly in her lap, her chin tilted just high enough to dare him to object. Now and again, the faint trace of jasmine drifted across the air. Each time, Wade tightened his grip on the reins. By the time the ranch came into view, the tension between them was taut as a stretched rope. The rolling T ranch unfurled across 5,000 acres of prime grazing land, crowned by the 2-story timber house Wade had built with his own hands. "It's larger than I expected," Ruby said at last. Her tone was calm, unreadable. "I'm a man of means, Miss Dawson," Wade answered sharply, "which is why I expected honesty in our arrangement." Ruby descended from the wagon without waiting for his hand. Dust clung to her boots as she lifted her chin in defiance. "And would you have answered my letter if I'd told the truth? 28 with a past looking for escape. How many offers would that have earned me?" Wade hefted her trunk, surprised at its weight. She hadn't come west to play at being a wife. She'd come to plant her feet. Inside, he led her upstairs to a narrow spare room. "You'll stay here. Supper's at 6. We'll discuss your return east then." Ruby set her bag on the bed and turned, her amber eyes blazing. "I'm not going back," she said simply. "Whatever you decide, Mr. Thatcher, I'm not going back." Wade froze, unsettled. He had broken wild horses that carried that same unyielding fire in their eyes. Fierce, untamed. And for the first time in years, he found himself unsure of his next move. "We'll see about that," Wade muttered as he retreated down the hall. But even as the words left his lips, some part of him already knew. This woman wasn't leaving. And worse still, she might be the one thing he couldn't bend to his will. The first supper at the ranch hung heavy with silence. Wade sat at the head of the long oak table, the same seat where Martha had once ladled stew and set fresh bread by his plate. Now the chair across from him was filled by Ruby Dawson, her steady amber eyes locking on his without a flicker of hesitation. Mrs. Ensley, the housekeeper, moved stiffly between them, her disapproval thick as the steam rising from the dishes she carried. She had buried Martha with her own hands and wore her loyalty like armor. Each clink of plate and pot seemed a protest, and Wade knew by sunrise the whole town would have the story. Ruby, however, ate with measured grace, unbothered by the frost in the room. She sipped her water, chewed slowly, her gaze lingering on the walls hung with rifles, old photographs, and the mounted skull of a longhorn bull. "You run a tight household," she said at last. "I run a ranch," Wade replied, his voice firm. "Household comes second. Then I'll see to it," Ruby countered without hesitation. "A man can't work the land all day and come home to dust and silence." Her words struck deeper than Wade cared to admit, tugging at something he hadn't realized he missed. But he caught himself. He had brought her here out of necessity. Order, stability, control. And this woman threatened all three. The days that followed became a quiet contest of wills. Ruby rose before dawn, skirts hitched as she scrubbed the kitchen, mended curtains, and baked bread that filled the house with warm, yeasty air. By afternoon she was outside, sleeves rolled, tending chickens or hauling water with unflinching determination. The ranch hands watched in surprise, some even tipping their hats as she passed. She carried herself not as a guest nor as a burden, but as if she already belonged. Wade tried to ignore it. He lost himself in the pastures, riding fence lines, driving cattle, doing anything to escape the unsettling presence back at the house. Yet each evening when he returned, the silence was gone. Lamps glowed in every window. Supper waited on the table, and Ruby sat across from him, her gaze steady, the lamplight shaping her figure in ways that dried his throat and stirred thoughts he didn't want to name. One evening, the sky split open. A storm rolled across the plains, rain lashing the windows while thunder rattled the rafters. Wade came in dripping, boots heavy with mud. He braced himself for the same cold silence that had haunted his home for years. Instead, Ruby was waiting, a towel in her hands, a steaming bowl of stew on the table. "You'll catch fever if you stay wet," she scolded, stepping close, fussing over him with a care that caught him off guard. Her hands were warm against his skin, her scent stronger in the damp air. For a fleeting moment, Wade let her tend him, and in that moment something deep inside ached. A part of him he had locked away since Martha's death stirred awake. He pulled back suddenly, heart hammering in his chest. "This changes nothing," he muttered. Ruby's eyes sparked amber fire in the lamplight. "It changes everything. You wanted a meek little girl you could mold to your will, but that's not who I am. You can send me back east, Wade Thatcher, but I won't crawl. I came here to survive, and I'll do it with or without your blessing." Wade had faced rustlers, broken wild stallions, endured droughts that starved his herds. But never had anyone stood in his house and spoken to him with such defiance. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. By morning, the whispers had already swept through Cedar Ridge. The so-called young bride was no girl at all. Some townsfolk laughed, others clucked their tongues with scandal. Yet on the ranch, Ruby won loyalty. The hands admired her grit. The way she rolled up her sleeves met their eyes straight and worked alongside them without complaint. Even Mrs. Ensley, stiff and cold, softened when Ruby sat through nights at her bedside during a fever, nursing her back to health. Still, Wade fought himself. Each time he caught Ruby laughing with the ranch hands or heard her humming low as she hung linens in the wind, something twisted inside him. Desire tangled with pride, need battled with fear. The breaking point came swift without warning. Trouble had been riding the edges of town. A gang of drifters spotted down by the river. 3 men known for robbing travelers blind. One evening, as Ruby walked back from the barn with her skirts gathered in one hand, Wade's eyes caught movement along the fence line, shadows shifting where no shadows should be. He shouted for his rifle and tore across the yard, but he was too late. By the time he reached her, 3 figures had slipped from the dark. The leader, a wiry man, with a scar jagging across his jaw, snatched Ruby's arm and yanked her back against him. "Pretty thing like you don't belong on a ranch," the scarred man sneered. "Come with us. We'll show you real fun." Ruby didn't scream. Instead, her knee shot up hard into his gut, making him stumble back with a curse. The other 2 moved in, knives flashing in the lamplight. Wade leveled his rifle, his voice booming across the storm-lashed yard. "Let her go or you'll meet your maker tonight." The standoff froze in the rain. Ruby's dress clung to her curves, her amber eyes burning, not with fear but fury. She had been tested before, Wade saw it now, and she would not break. He fired once, the bullet slicing the brim clean off the scarred man's hat. The gang cursed, panic flashing in their eyes, then scattered into the dark, swallowed by the storm. Ruby stood trembling, soaked to the bone but unbroken. "You could have been killed," Wade snapped, lowering the rifle, his chest heaving. Ruby stepped closer, wet hair plastered to her cheeks, her voice steady. "So could you. But I didn't run, and I never will." In that moment, Wade understood. He hadn't brought home a meek bride to tame. He had brought home a storm, one no fence could ever contain. That night, after the drifters had fled, the house was quiet, but for the patter of rain on the roof. Wade sat before the fire, flames reflecting in his steel-gray eyes. Control, that had always been his creed. Control of his land, his cattle, his men, and most of all, his own heart. But Ruby Dawson had shattered every rule he had lived by. She entered the room wrapped in a shawl, her hair still damp from washing away the dirt of the scuffle. Without waiting for permission, she sat across from him. Firelight danced across her face, softening the lines of weariness, sharpening the fierce glow in her eyes. "You're angry," she said quietly. "You lied," Wade answered, his voice low, rough with the weight of all he hadn't said. "You told me you were 20, wrote that you were looking to be a young wife. Instead, you show up with secrets and storms. I didn't ask for that." Ruby's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm, steady as stone. "And you? You wrote that you wanted a wife, not a servant." Yet your ad sounded more like a job posting than a proposal, Ruby said, her voice cutting sharp and true. Don't preach honesty to me, Wade Thatcher. You wanted someone to fill a role, not a heart. The words hit deep because they were true. Wade's fists curled, the urge to shout rising hot in his chest, but she didn't flinch, didn't yield. Instead, Ruby leaned forward, her tone softening, her gaze unshakable. I've lived through things you can't imagine, she whispered. I've buried kin, worked my hands raw, and heard men tell me I was too much or not enough. I came here because I needed a chance to breathe. To build a life where I wasn't just surviving. Maybe I lied about my age, but I never lied about wanting a home. The fire popped, filling the silence between them. Wade said nothing for a long while, staring into the flames. But slowly his anger eased and he began to see her not as an intruder but as a mirror. She too carried ghosts. She too was running from the hollow ache of loss. And maybe, just maybe, she was running toward the same thing he had always been too proud to admit he wanted. In the days that followed, the bond between them tightened like braided rope. Wade caught himself watching her when she laughed with the ranch hands, skirts dusted from chores, sunlight threading through her hair. At night, when she walked the halls with a lamp in her hand, the glow trailed her like a halo, chasing shadows from the house that had long felt like a tomb. He resisted, but his walls were crumbling. One evening, as the sun bled red over the wide plains, Ruby stood at the corral, stroking the muzzle of a restless mare. Wade approached quietly, the scent of dust and leather between them. She's wild, he said, nodding to the horse. Ruby's lips curved into the faintest smile. So am I. Something inside him gave way. He reached for her hand, rough, weathered skin brushing against hers, smooth and warm. She didn't pull back. The moment stretched, alive with the hum of cicadas and the soft whicker of the mare. I wanted someone I could control, Wade admitted, his voice low, raw, but what I need is someone who won't let me. Ruby's eyes shone, not with triumph, but with understanding. She stepped closer, her voice trembling with quiet strength. Then stop fighting me, Wade, let me in. And with that, the walls around his heart finally collapsed. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, as if the world itself might try to steal her away. For the first time since Martha's passing, warmth filled the hollow space inside his chest. But love in the West was never simple. Days later, the drifters returned, this time with vengeance in their eyes and fire in their hands. They lit the hay barn, torches painting the night sky in a furious glow. Wade and his men charged hard, rifles cracking in the dark. But it was Ruby who turned the tide. She planted herself at the water pump, skirts singed by stray sparks, passing buckets with a fierceness that pulled every man to her side. Shoulder to shoulder she fought until the flames were beaten down and the outlaws lay bound in the dirt. By dawn the ranch still stood, scarred, blackened, but unbroken. The men, soot-streaked and hollow-eyed, tipped their hats to Ruby Dawson, no longer as a stranger, but as one of their own. When the first light spilled across the plains, Wade found her sitting on the porch steps, her face streaked with ash, her spirit shining brighter than the rising sun. He lowered himself beside her, the weight of it all pressing heavy on his shoulders. You're not what I asked for, he said quietly. Ruby turned, waiting, unflinching. You're more. Her smile was weary, but radiant. Then maybe we're both finally where we belong. The West was merciless. It chewed up the weak, tested the strong, and left scars that never faded. But sometimes, rarely, it gave more than it took. For Wade Thatcher, it had given him Ruby Dawson, a woman too fierce to command but strong enough to love. And in that truth, for the first time in years, Wade Thatcher found peace.